When the snow covers the fields of battle, and the winds sing songs of betrayal, honor, and heroes, time itself seems to stand still. The past awakens in the voices of those who once looked death in the face, in the voices we shall hear once more today.
The sea was wide and whispering that morning, a gray, endless plain of rippling steel. Arya Stark stood at the bow of the Nymeria's song, the wind tugging her hair free from its braids. The air smelled of salt and storm, the taste of freedom sharp on her tongue. Behind her lay Westeros, the broken kingdoms, the wars, the names she had once whispered by candlelight on a list of vengeance. Ahead of her stretched nothing but the unmapped world, the place where the sun sank and stories ended. She had left quietly, no banners, no farewells, just a note to Sansa and a promise to return if she ever found something worth returning for. The ship had been a gift from Lord Davos Seaworth, its sails pale and strong, its decks worn smooth by honest work. The crew was a mismatched lot, Northmen who had followed her out of loyalty to her name, sailors from Lys who dreamed of gold and adventure, and even a pair of summer islanders who swore they had once seen dragons in the western skies. Arya liked them well enough, though she trusted few. Old habits died hard. The voyage began in calm waters, but as the days stretched into weeks, the world seemed to change. The stars above them shifted. The constellations that had guided men for centuries no longer matched the patterns the maesters swore by. Once, in the dead of night, a sailor claimed he saw a face in the waves, pale and weeping, with eyes like pearls. By morning, he was gone, leaving only his boots at the rail. Arya said nothing. She had seen stranger things. On the 12th day of their voyage, a storm rose without warning. The sky turned black as iron, and the sea howled like a living thing. Waves crashed over the deck, tearing ropes free and snapping masts like twigs. Arya fought alongside her crew, soaked to the bone, her arms aching as she hauled the rigging back from the brink. "Hold fast!" she shouted, voice breaking against the wind. "Hold fast or we'll all be lost!" Lightning split the sky, a white serpent lashing across the heavens. For a heartbeat, Arya saw something far out on the horizon, a dark shape that moved against the storm, gliding with a grace no ship should have in such waters. Then the light was gone, and the world went black again. When the storm finally broke, the Nymeria's song was battered but afloat. Half the sails were torn, 2 men dead, 1 missing. The crew worked in grim silence, patching what they could. The sea had gone strangely still, like a beast that had spent its fury. That night, Arya climbed the foredeck and sat alone with needle across her knees. The blade was duller now, worn by years and salt, but its presence steadied her. She remembered her father's voice. "The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives." Her pack was far away, yet somehow she felt closer to them out here, where the wind spoke of old things and the sea whispered secrets in the dark. The next morning, they sighted something on the horizon, a shimmer like light breaking over glass. The crew stirred with excitement, pointing and shouting. Land, they thought. But the shimmer moved, and as they drew nearer, it seemed not land, but fog, dense, silver, and humming faintly as if alive. "Should we turn back, Captain?" called Jory, a grizzled Northman who had once served at Winterfell. Arya looked at the fog. It pulsed like a heart, drawing them closer with every breath. "No," she said. We sail on." They entered the mist by noon. The light dimmed, turning the world soft and colorless. The sea beneath them glowed faintly, like moonlight caught in glass. The crew murmured prayers to the Seven, to the drowned god, to anyone who might listen. Arya said nothing, though her hand tightened on the hilt of needle. Then came the whispering, faint at first, like the sigh of the tide. It grew until it filled the air, a chorus of soft voices calling names she almost recognized. Jon, Sansa, Ned, Mother. The mist curled around her, warm and cold all at once. For a moment, Arya thought she saw faces, pale, flickering, familiar. She stumbled back, heart pounding. "This is a trick," she hissed. A shadow loomed ahead, a towering shape rising from the fog. The crew gasped, some falling to their knees. Slowly, the mist thinned, revealing cliffs of black stone rising from the sea, slick with silver moss. Above them stretched a sky she had never seen before, dim with two suns, one pale and small, one crimson like blood. They had found land. As the Nymeria's song approached the shore, Arya felt a strange pull in her chest, a deep, wordless recognition, as though some part of her blood remembered this place. The cliffs were carved with markings, runes older than the first men, curling like vines around faces of stone wolves and weirwoods without eyes. She stepped onto the sand, dark as ash, and the world seemed to hold its breath. "Where are we?" whispered one of the sailors. Arya looked out over the strange silver sea, the mist, the double suns, and the runes that glowed faintly as she passed. She could not answer, but she felt the words form in her mind, ancient and sure. The unmapped lands. And far above, hidden in the cliffs, something watched, eyes burning like stars in the dusk. The beach stretched long and black beneath the twin suns, the waves sighing softly as though weary from some ancient labor. The air was cooler here, heavy with a strange scent, not salt, but something older, like rain fallen upon stone that had not seen daylight in 1,000 years. Arya Stark stood with her boots sinking into the dark sand, staring at the cliffs that rose like the broken teeth of giants. Behind her, the Nymeria's song rested at anchor, its sails torn and weary. The crew moved about nervously, whispering prayers, glancing toward the mist that lingered over the water as if afraid it might reach for them again. They had survived the storm, crossed a sea no man had ever charted, and yet none of them cheered. The silence of this place gnawed at them. Jory came to her side, a streak of salt still crusted in his beard. "No birds, no beasts, no sound but the sea," he murmured. "It feels wrong, milady." Arya nodded. She felt it too, that uneasy quiet, that strange pull in her blood. Still, she drew her cloak tighter and said, "Wrong or not, we came here to see what lies beyond the edge of the world. We'll go ashore." They climbed the cliffs by a narrow path, slick with silver moss that gleamed faintly in the dim light. The stones were cold beneath their hands, carved with runes that pulsed like veins of fire when the sun touched them. Once atop the ridge, they found a vast plain covered in a pale mist that shimmered faintly, not with heat, but with light that seemed to come from the ground itself. In the distance, half veiled by the fog, rose shapes that might have been ruins, walls and towers bowed by time, their edges softened as if the world itself had begun to swallow them. "By the gods," whispered one of the Lyseni sailors. "Is it alive?" Arya glanced at him. The ground beneath their boots seemed to hum almost imperceptibly, a low vibration that stirred through the soles of her feet and into her bones. "Alive or dead," she said. "We'll find out soon enough." They made their way toward the ruins. As they walked, Arya felt eyes upon them, though she could see no movement. The mist shifted, coiling around the pillars and arches like pale smoke. Once, she thought she saw a figure standing among the stones, tall, cloaked, unmoving. But when she blinked, it was gone. The ruins proved vast and strange. The walls were made of black stone, fused smooth as glass, and every surface bore carvings. Men with wolf heads, trees with faces, and rivers that ran in spirals rather than straight lines. The style was neither Valyrian nor anything known in the free cities.
Arya paused before one great mural, where a host of armored figures knelt before a woman crowned with antlers and flame. In her hand she held a sword of light, and around her feet wolves prowled. Beneath the carving, a single line of runes pulsed faintly, as if breathing.
"Do you know what it says?" asked Jory. Arya shook her head, but something deep inside her stirred. An echo, a whisper in her own tongue that was not quite her own. "The wolf of the setting sun will come again, bearing the blood of the first." A chill rippled down her spine. They made camp within the shelter of the fallen walls. The men built fires that smoked and sputtered, for the wood they found nearby burned blue and cold. That night, Arya stood watch atop the wall, needle resting across her knees. The stars above were not the stars she knew. They burned green and gold, and among them shimmered a faint ribbon of silver light that moved, not like a comet, but as though it were alive. She thought of Winterfell then, of Sansa's laughter, of Jon's quiet eyes, of Bran's ravens. All seemed far away, part of another world entirely. It was close to midnight when she heard the whisper. "Stark." The voice was soft as a sigh, yet it seemed to come from everywhere. The stones, the air, the sea below. Arya leapt to her feet, needle flashing. "Who's there?" The mist thickened before her, swirling into the shape of a woman, tall, with long hair that gleamed like silver frost. Her eyes shone pale and knowing. When she spoke again, her voice was neither young nor old. "You should not have come." Arya steadied her sword. "And yet here I am." The spirit tilted her head as though studying her. "Wolf's blood, old blood. It stirs again in you." "What is this place?" Arya asked. "The land before memory," said the woman. "The home of those who fled the breaking of the world. Once the first men walked here, before the sea rose and the mists swallowed their path."
You are the first to return, and perhaps the last. Arya frowned.
"Return? I've never been here."
The spirit's lips curved faintly.
"Not you, child of winter, but your blood. The wolves of the north came from this place long ago, when the world was young. You were called back. The sea remembers its own." Before Arya could speak again, the figure began to fade, her form scattering like mist in wind. "Beware the red sun," she whispered. "When it burns, the land will drown once more." And then she was gone. By dawn, Arya told no one of what she had seen. The men were uneasy enough. Yet, as the sun rose, the crimson one, low and vast, she noticed that the tide had crept higher up the cliffs. The sea, once calm, now hissed against the rocks, restless and strange. They pressed deeper into the ruins that day, and before noon they found something astonishing. a gate of pale stone carved into a hillside, sealed with a heavy slab marked by the sigil of a direwolf. Arya reached out and touched it. The stone was warm beneath her fingers. The runes upon it flared briefly with pale light. Behind her, one of the sailors crossed himself and muttered a prayer. "What do you think lies beyond?" asked Jory quietly. Arya sheathed her sword. "Only one way to find out." Together they pushed. The gate shuddered, then gave way with a deep groan. Darkness breathed out, thick, cool, and smelling of earth and old rain. Arya took a torch, its blue flame flickering. She stepped into the dark. And there, beneath the ground, they found the first of the living. Figures emerged from the shadows, tall and pale, their hair white as bone, their eyes glowing faintly like the heart of the moon. They wore cloaks of woven leaves and spoke in a language that sang like wind through trees. Yet when they saw Arya, they fell silent. Then, slowly, they knelt. "The wolf of the setting sun," one of them whispered. Arya's heart quickened. Whatever this place was, whatever it meant, she had crossed more than the edge of the world. She had stepped into a forgotten part of her own blood. And far above, unseen, the red sun pulsed, brightening as if awakening. The chamber stretched deep beneath the earth, its walls alive with faint light that pulsed in rhythm with the distant sea. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and something older, a sweetness like crushed pine and smoke. Arya Stark stood still, the torch trembling in her grasp, as she beheld the beings kneeling before her. They were not wraiths, nor ghosts, though their pale skin seemed to catch the light like polished moonstone. Their faces were narrow and beautiful in a strange, wild way, their eyes the color of mist and silver rain. They wore garments woven from some shimmering thread that shifted hue with every breath. In their hands they held slender spears, but they made no move to raise them. "The wolf of the setting sun," one said again, his voice low and melodic. "She has come as the stones foretold." Arya tightened her grip on Needle. "I am Arya Stark of Winterfell," she said. "I'm no one's prophecy." A murmur rippled through the group, soft as wind among leaves. Then an elder stepped forward, taller than the rest, with hair white as hoarfrost and eyes pale as dawnlight. Upon his brow he wore a circlet of woven reeds and bone. He inclined his head deeply. "You bear the blood of the first," he said, "and the blade of the wolf's line. The stones called, and you crossed the drowned path. You have returned to the cradle." Arya frowned. "Returned? I told another like you. I've never been here before." The elder smiled faintly, a gesture tinged with sorrow. "Not you, but those who walked before you when the world was one. The first men came from here before the breaking. Some fled east when the sea swallowed the western lands. Their blood endured. It sleeps in you still." His words echoed through the cavern, stirring something inside her, an ache she could not name. She thought of Winterfell, of the godswood and the faces carved into the weirwood's bark. Old gods, old blood. Could they have come from this place, this strange land beneath twin suns? "What is this place called?" she asked. "We call it Nothraven," said the elder, "the last haven. The sea grows restless again. The red sun burns hotter each year. Soon the tide will rise and claim all that remains." Jory stepped forward, uneasy. "You mean this land will drown?" The elder's gaze lingered on him. "Yes, and when it does, the memory of the first will vanish forever. Unless—" He turned to Arya once more. "Unless the wolf of the West leads us back to where the world still breathes." Arya shook her head. "I'm no leader. I'm just a traveler." The elder's expression softened, though his eyes held something grave and knowing. "You may deny it, child of winter, but the sea does not call to the wind in vain." They led the crew deeper into the caverns, through tunnels that glowed faintly with veins of crystal. The walls were carved with scenes of battles long forgotten, figures of stone fighting shapes that looked almost human, but for their eyes, carved dark and hollow. Arya recognized none of them, yet the carvings stirred her blood. At last, they reached a vast hollow chamber where a pool lay still as glass, its surface glowing faintly from within. Around its edge stood dozens of the Pale Folk, watching in silence. The elder gestured toward the pool. "Here lies the memory of Nothraven. The water shows truth to those who seek it." Arya approached cautiously. The water shimmered, deep and endless. She knelt and gazed into its depths, and gasped. In the rippling surface, she saw Winterfell, blanketed in snow, smoke rising from the forges, the great weirwood whispering in the wind. She saw Jon at the wall, Sansa upon her throne, Bran's eyes white and distant. Then the image shifted, the sea boiling red beneath a burning sky, ships swallowed by waves, faces she did not know crying out in terror. And at the heart of it all, she saw herself, standing at the prow of the Nymeria's song, the red sun reflected in her eyes, her hand reaching toward the west as if to command the tide itself. The vision vanished as quickly as it came. Arya staggered back, her heart pounding. "What was that?" "The sea's memory," said the elder, "and its warning. The red sun awakens. When it burns full, the world will break again. You are bound to its fate, as we are." Before she could answer, a shout echoed through the tunnel, one of her men calling her name. A Lyseni sailor came running, his face pale with fear. "Captain, there's movement near the cliffs. Figures, human ones. They came out of the mist." Arya turned sharply. "How many?" "Half a dozen, maybe more. They've got blades and torches. They bear a banner. The dire wolf of Winterfell." Her breath caught. "What?" But as the sailor spoke, another figure appeared behind him, tall, wrapped in a black cloak dripping with mist. When he lifted his hood, Arya froze. It was a face she knew, or thought she knew. "Gendry," she breathed. He smiled, weary and thin. "Aye, Gendry Waters, once of King's Landing, smith and Lord of Storm's End. I've been following your trail since you left Westeros. Sansa sent me." The crew erupted in whispers. Arya stepped closer, disbelief warring with anger. "You were supposed to stay. The realm needs you." He shrugged. "And yet here I am. Your sister feared you'd not return. She bid me bring you home if I found you, or bring word if I could not." Before Arya could speak, the elder moved between them, his eyes narrowing. "No one leaves these lands easily. The sea guards its secrets." Gendry looked past him at the Pale Folk. "You've made strange friends, Arya." "They're not my friends," she said, "but they might need our help." The elder's expression darkened.
The sea rises. It will not wait. If you wish to save them, you must sail soon, and never return. Arya turned toward Gendry, her voice low.
You came all this way for me, but if we leave them to drown...
He met her gaze steadily. Then you'll carry that weight, not I. But if you stay, you'll drown with them. The choice hung heavy between them. Behind her, the pale folk watched in silence, their faces unreadable. At last, Arya spoke.
We'll prepare the ship. At dawn, we sail east, and take as many as the Nymeria's song can bear.
The elder inclined his head. The wolf leads, so the tide obeys. As they returned to the surface, Arya glanced once more at the red sun, now burning low above the mist. It pulsed like a great heart, casting the land in shades of blood and gold. Something deep in her bones told her the elder spoke true. The world was shifting again, and she stood at the edge of its breaking. The sea hissed against the rocks as though in warning, and from the shadows of the ruins, unseen eyes watched her go. Dawn broke with a dim crimson light, as though the sky itself bled. The sea below the cliffs was no longer calm. Its surface rippled with a strange, slow pulse, like the breathing of some vast creature stirring from slumber. Arya Stark stood upon the high ridge, cloak snapping in the cold wind, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Beyond the mist, she could see the faint shimmer of the Nymeria's song waiting, battered, faithful, ready to bear them once more into the unknown. Below her, the pale folk of Nothravan gathered in silence. They moved with eerie grace, carrying little save their woven cloaks and the strange crystal talismans that hung from their necks. Gendry and Jory worked among the crew, readying ropes and makeshift rafts to ferry them to the ship. The tide was already rising higher than before, hissing as it clawed at the black rocks. Arya turned to the elder, who stood beside her with a staff carved from living bone.
His face was calm, but his pale eyes held a sorrow deeper than words.
You said the sea would rise, Arya said. How long before it reaches these cliffs?
Before the second dawn, the elder replied. The red sun burns stronger now. The deep remembers its hunger. Arya glanced toward the horizon, where that same sun hung low and swollen, a red wound in the sky.
Then we move fast.
They began their descent. The cliffs groaned beneath their feet as though alive, trembling faintly with each passing hour. The first of the pale folk reached the boats, their hands cold as frost as they clung to the ropes. Some whispered softly in their own tongue, prayers perhaps, or farewells. By mid-morning, the tide had surged higher, forcing them to hurry. The sea no longer smelled of salt, but of iron and rain, sharp and strange. Now and again, Arya thought she saw shapes moving in the depths, vast, shadowy forms that glided just below the surface. When at last she stepped aboard the Nymeria's song, she felt the old thrill stir within her, the call of the open sea, the promise of what lay beyond. But this time it came with a weight. The lives now crowding her deck, the eyes that looked to her as if she were something more than mortal. Gendry approached, his face streaked with sweat and grime.
We can fit no more, he said. Any more weight and she'll founder.
Arya looked over the side. Still a dozen or more of the pale folk waited below, their pale faces lifted toward her.
We can't leave them, she said. We'll sink if we don't,
Gendry answered bluntly.
The sea's rising too fast. Look!
She followed his gaze. Far out across the bay, the horizon seemed to bulge upward, a slow-moving wall of dark water crawling toward them. The sound of it reached them faintly, a low, relentless thunder. Arya felt her chest tighten.
We take as many as we can. The rest.
She hesitated, then turned to the elder.
You said the sea remembers.
Is there nowhere else they can go? The elder's gaze was distant. The sea gives, the sea takes. But there is one place still above the deep, the Isle of the Ashen Tree, far to the south. It will not hold forever, but perhaps long enough.
Then they go there, Arya said. All of them.
You would send them alone?
No.
She looked to the smaller of their boats, the Silver Wing, built from salvaged timbers and fitted with sails stitched from the remnants of the storm.
We'll tow it. They'll follow us east until the currents divide, then make for the isle.
Gendry studied her for a long moment. You always were stubborn, he muttered. Arya almost smiled.
You always liked that about me.
By noon, they had filled the decks and launched the Silver Wing. The wind rose sharp from the west, carrying the taste of rain. As they turned the prow eastward, the cliffs of Northraven began to crumble, stones tumbling into the sea with hollow thunder. The elder stood at the stern, his cloak streaming behind him.
The land dies, he said softly. The age of Northraven ends.
Arya's gaze remained fixed ahead.
Then we give it a new beginning.
For a time, it seemed they might succeed. The Nymeria's song surged through the waves, her patched sails straining but steady. The mist fell behind them like a curtain, and the wind grew stronger, carrying them toward clearer skies. The pale folk stood quietly, their eyes turned east, their expressions unreadable. Then, without warning, the sea darkened. The wind faltered, and the air turned cold. Not the simple chill of weather, but a deep, unnatural cold that sank into the bones. The water beneath the ship began to glow faintly, lines of pale light twisting and curling like veins of fire beneath glass. Jory shouted from the rigging, "Something's moving below us!" Before Arya could respond, the ship lurched violently. The crew stumbled, cries rising as ropes snapped.
The glow beneath the water brightened, and from the depths rose a shape vast and terrible. A creature like no beast Arya had ever seen, its skin smooth as ice, its eyes glowing blue-white. It circled the ship once, slow and silent. Then it spoke. Not in words, but in a sound that seemed to echo inside her skull, a low voice full of sorrow and hunger. You should not have come. Arya's breath caught. The voice was the same as the Mistwoman's, though deeper, older. Gendry drew his hammer, though what use it could be against such a thing she could not guess. "What is it?" he demanded. The elder's voice was faint. The memory of the sea, the guardian of the drowned path. It wakes to reclaim what should not leave. The creature drew closer, its vast form rising from the depths until its shadow covered the deck. Arya felt the ship shudder beneath her feet. Around them, the water boiled. "Hold fast!" she shouted. "Archers, ready!" But arrows meant nothing. The beast did not strike. It merely watched, its luminous eyes fixed upon her. And in that gaze, she felt something. Recognition. Then, as suddenly as it had come, it turned and sank again, the light fading with it. The sea stilled. A stunned silence followed. Then Jory whispered, "Seven, save us." Arya's knuckles whitened on Needle's hilt.
It let us go,
she said.
For now.
The elder nodded.
The sea remembers its own. It will not strike you while the blood of the first beats in your heart.
Gendry wiped sweat from his brow. "Let's hope that's enough." As night fell, the sky burned red once more. Arya stood alone at the prow, her reflection flickering in the dark water. Behind her lay the dying land of Northraven, swallowed by mist and memory. Ahead stretched the long road home, or what might be left of it. But as the stars kindled above the twin suns, she thought she heard a whisper upon the wind, soft and distant. Her name, carried from across the waves.
And for the first time, Arya Stark of Winterfell wondered if the sea had truly let her go. The night that followed was long and restless. The stars above the ship burned cold and strange, no longer the constellations Arya knew. Their patterns shifted like living things, twisting and shimmering until her eyes ached to follow them. Beneath the hull, the sea murmured, not the gentle roll of waves, but a deep, steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of something vast that stirred beneath the world. Arya Stark stood alone upon the deck, her cloak pulled tight against the chill wind. Behind her, the pale folk huddled in silence, their faces turned toward the eastern sky, as if listening for something beyond mortal hearing. The Nymeria's song creaked softly, her patched sails ghostly in the dim light. Gendry found her there before dawn, his face lined with exhaustion. "You should rest," he said quietly. "You haven't closed your eyes since we left shore." Arya glanced toward the horizon, where the faintest light began to bleed through the mist. "Rest can wait. The sea's changing again." He followed her gaze. The water, once black as ink, had taken on a pale sheen, not quite silver, not quite white, like glass that caught the breath of dawn. It shimmered faintly, ripples forming in strange patterns that curved and crossed like letters in a language she could almost read. "You think that thing will come back?" Gendry asked. Arya shook her head. "No, it did what it came for. It wanted to see us leave. Then let's not give it reason to regret it." He turned away to help the crew, but Arya's eyes remained fixed on the sea. For a moment, she thought she saw faces beneath the surface, pale, sorrowful, fleeting. Then they were gone, leaving only the reflection of the sky. By morning, the wind had changed. It carried with it the scent of ash and rain, and a strange hum that rose and fell like the sound of distant chanting. The elder came to stand beside her, his cloak drawn close. "The red sun bleeds faster now," he said softly. "The sea grows hungry." Arya studied him. "You said this has happened before, that your people fled when the land sank. How did they survive then?" "By faith," he replied, "and by sacrifice. The sea demands its due each time the world turns." His words unsettled her. "Sacrifice?" The elder's pale eyes met hers. "To keep the tide from claiming all, one must be given to the deep. A life freely offered to balance the taking. It is the old law." Arya's jaw tightened. "No one on my ship will die for superstition." The elder bowed his head slightly, though the look he gave her was one of quiet pity. "The sea does not care what name you give its hunger." By midday, clouds gathered in the west, low and dark, heavy with storm. The wind picked up, and the Nymeria's song groaned under the strain. Arya took the helm as the first drops of rain began to fall, cold as melted ice. The sea turned wild in moments, waves rearing like great black beasts. "Reef the mainsail!" she shouted, her voice lost in the roar. "Secure the lines!" Men scrambled to obey. Gendry fought beside her, hauling rope with bare hands as lightning cracked across the sky. The pale folk clung to the masts, their strange eyes shining in the flashes of light. Then came the sound.
a deep, echoing cry that rose from the sea itself, so vast it seemed to shake the bones of the world. The water around them surged, lifting the ship high before dropping it again with a thunderous crash. Jory shouted from the rigging, "It's not wind, Captain! The sea's pulling itself down!" Arya looked over the rail and saw the water falling away, sucked downward into a spiraling abyss that yawned open where the horizon had been. Around its rim, lightning danced in a ring of white fire. "The drowned path," the elder whispered. "It opens again." The Nymeria's song lurched toward the vortex, dragged by a current stronger than any tide.
Men screamed, ropes snapped, sails tore like paper. Arya seized the helm, fighting to keep the ship steady.
"Cut the tow line!"
Gendry shouted. The Silver Wing strained behind them, the smaller vessel twisting in the pull of the whirlpool. Dozens of pale folk clung to its deck, their voices rising in a haunting chant.
"If we cut them loose, they'll die," Arya shouted back. "If we don't, so will we."
For a heartbeat, she hesitated. And in that moment, the Silver Wing was caught by the current, spinning faster, its bow rising toward the sky. Then, with a sound like the world breaking, it vanished into the deep. The sea swallowed it whole. A terrible silence followed. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath. The whirlpool closed slowly, leaving only dark water and scattered wreckage. Arya gripped the rail until her knuckles turned white.
"Gods forgive me,"
she whispered. The elder's voice was faint.
"The sea has taken what it was owed. The path will come."
And so it did. The waves eased, the rain thinned to mist, and at last the wind fell quiet. But the deck was strewn with the remnants of loss, torn rope, splintered wood, faces pale with grief. As the red sun sank below the horizon, Arya stood beside Gendry at the bow. Neither spoke. The pale folk moved among the crew, murmuring prayers in their lilting tongue. From the hold came the soft sound of weeping. When darkness settled, the elder came again.
"The path is clear now," he said. "If you sail east by the moon's light, you will reach safe waters before dawn."
Arya turned to him.
"And what lies there?"
He smiled faintly.
"What always lies ahead for those who flee the past. Another beginning."
That night, the sea lay still as glass. The red sun faded, replaced by a sky of silver stars. Arya leaned upon the rail, the wind cool against her face. She thought of the faces lost to the deep, of the land that had vanished behind her, of the choice she had made. Gendry came to stand beside her, his voice low. "You saved more than you lost." She shook her head.
"It doesn't feel that way."
"Maybe it never does." They stood together in silence as the ship glided forward through the calm. Far ahead, faint and distant, a new glow began to rise. Not the red of the dying sun, but soft gold, warm and steady. "The east," Gendry murmured. "Home." But Arya said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on the light, and somewhere, deep within her, a whisper stirred once more. The voice of the sea, low and insistent, calling her name from beneath the waves. She did not answer, not yet, but she knew it would not stop calling. Morning crept slowly over the calm sea, painting the horizon with shades of gray and pale gold. The storm had passed, but it left behind a silence that felt unnatural, as if the world itself were holding its breath. The Nymeria's song drifted on the slow current, her sails limp, her crew hollow-eyed from grief and sleeplessness.
The pale folk who had survived the night moved like ghosts among the men, tending the wounded, murmuring their strange songs of mourning. Arya stood at the stern, watching the waters where the Silver Wing had vanished. The sea was quiet now, smooth and dark as glass. She thought of the faces lost beneath those waves, the men who had followed her west, and the pale folk who had sung to the sea until the end. Their cries still echoed in her mind, mingling with the roar of the storm. Gendry came to her side, his hammer slung at his belt, his eyes shadowed. "The men are asking how much farther," he said. "They're afraid this calm won't last." "It won't," Arya answered. "But we keep moving, east, until the stars make sense again." He nodded, but said nothing more. The wind was gone, and the ship moved only by oar and current. The men rowed in weary silence, their muscles trembling with every stroke. Above them, the sky was strangely empty. Even the gulls had vanished. By midday, the air began to shimmer.
The heat rose off the water, distorting the horizon until it seemed the sea itself was melting. Then came the smell, faint at first, like burning wood, but growing stronger with every passing hour. Jory, standing watch, shaded his eyes.
"Smoke, Captain! To the east!"
Arya turned sharply. On the horizon, a thin, dark line was spreading across the sky. Not a storm this time, but smoke, rising thick and black. She felt a sudden pulse of hope.
"Land," she said. "Or ships."
The crew roused themselves, murmuring prayers and oaths. They rowed harder, the Nymeria's song cutting through the water like a blade. The nearer they came, the thicker the smoke grew, until it filled the air, choking and bitter. Then, through the haze, they saw it. An island of jagged stone, its cliffs streaked red with fire. Flames licked the sky from the island's heart, pouring up from fissures in the rock. Rivers of molten light snaked down toward the sea, hissing where they met the waves. Yet, amid the ruin, Arya saw something else. Dark shapes moving along the shore.
"People," she breathed. "There are people there."
The elder appeared beside her, his pale eyes reflecting the firelight.
"The Isle of the Ashen Tree," he said. "The last refuge of those who fled before. The sea spared it, but the fire beneath does not sleep." "Can we land there?" asked Gendry. "For a time," the elder said, "but not long. The island is dying."
Still, Arya gave the order.
"Bring her in. If there are survivors, we help them."
As they neared the shore, the air grew thick with heat. The sea steamed around them, and the wood of the Nymeria's song creaked as though it might catch flame. When at last they dropped anchor in the shallow bay, Arya led the first landing party ashore. The ground was warm beneath her boots, the sand black and coarse. The island smelled of ash and earth, of burning life. Great cracks split the ground, glowing faintly with molten fire. Yet near the edge of a smoking forest, Arya found what she had hoped for. A small settlement of huts built from blackened wood and stone. Figures emerged as she approached, wary and thin, their skins streaked with soot. They were not like the pale folk from Nothraven. These had darker hair, their eyes green and gold. They stared at Arya's party with a mixture of fear and wonder. One of them stepped forward, a woman clad in a cloak of scorched feathers, her face painted with red clay.
"You came from the west,"
she said, her voice rough from smoke.
"No one sails from there and lives."
Arya lowered her hood.
"We did. We came from Nothraven. It's gone now. Drowned."
The woman's expression shifted, sorrow flickering in her eyes.
"Then the end is near indeed."
The fire has begun to eat the roots of the ashen tree." "The tree?" Arya asked. The woman turned and gestured toward the heart of the island, where a pillar of smoke rose higher than the rest. "Come and see." They followed her through the burning forest. The trees here were ancient, their trunks blackened by fire, yet somehow still alive, their leaves silver and trembling. And at the island's center stood the ashen tree, a colossal weirwood, its bark white as bone and its leaves the color of flame. Fire burned in cracks along its trunk, but still it stood, vast and proud, its face carved deep into the wood. Arya stopped before it, her breath caught in her throat. The face was old, older than Winterfell's heart tree, older than any she had ever seen. Its eyes wept sap like blood, and its mouth curved in something that was neither sorrow nor anger, but both. "This tree," said the woman, "was the last gift of the first. When the sea rose, they planted it here, believing its roots would hold the world together. But now the roots burn, and when they break, the sea will rise again." Arya felt the truth of those words in her bones. The heat pulsed beneath her feet, steady and deep. She could feel it spreading outward, reaching for the sea. "What can be done?" she asked. The woman shook her head. "Nothing. The fire is the world's heartbeat. When it falters, all must fall." But the elder stepped forward, his eyes alight with strange resolve. "There is one thing. The sea and fire were once one, balance made flesh. If the wolf of the setting sun gives her blood to the roots, the fire may sleep again." Arya turned sharply. "My blood? You mean—" "A sacrifice," said the elder softly. "A life freely given, to mend what was broken." Gendry stepped between them. "No, we've lost enough. There has to be another way." But Arya knew there wasn't. She could feel the pull of the place, the same pull she had felt when she first stepped on Northraven's shore. The sea had called her west, and now the fire called her home. "I'm not dying for prophecy," she said at last, though her voice trembled. "But if my blood can buy these people time, even a little, I'll give it." Gendry seized her arm. "Arya, don't!" She looked at him then, really looked, at the soot on his face, the worry in his eyes. For a moment, she was the girl from Winterfell again, and he was just the smith who made her a blade. "I have to," she whispered. He said nothing, only let her go. Arya stepped to the base of the ashen tree. She drew needle from its sheath, old, scarred, but sharp still. The bark of the tree was hot beneath her hand, pulsing like a living heart. She pressed the blade against her palm and cut deep. Her blood fell upon the roots, hissing as it met the fire. The tree shuddered. The flames along its trunk dimmed. The earth trembled beneath her feet. Then came the whisper. Not in her mind this time, but all around her. A voice vast and gentle, older than gods or kings. "The blood remembers." Light flared. The world tilted.
Arya's knees buckled, and the last thing she saw before darkness took her was Gendry's face, his mouth forming her name, his hand reaching for hers, and behind him, the ashen tree blazing brighter than the dawn. When Arya woke, she could not tell if it was morning or night. The air around her shimmered faintly, thick with silver mist that clung to her skin and hair. She lay upon a bed of cool stone, her cloak folded beneath her, and above her arched the vast white branches of the ashen tree. The fire that had once consumed it was gone,
Now its bark glowed faintly, like moonlight upon snow, and from its hollow trunk came a deep, slow rhythm, a heartbeat, ancient and steady. She sat up, wincing as pain rippled through her arm. A bandage was wrapped around her palm, and beneath it she felt the dull throb of the wound she had made. For a moment, her thoughts were fogged, half-formed, caught between dream and waking. Then it came back to her. The fire, the blood, the light that had swallowed everything. "You should not move yet," said a voice. Arya turned sharply. Gendry stood at the edge of the clearing, his hammer slung over one shoulder. His face was drawn, his eyes red-rimmed from sleeplessness. Behind him, the pale folk and the survivors of the island moved quietly among the roots of the great tree, tending to the wounded and gathering supplies. "How long?" she asked. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, thin and echoing. 2 days, Gendry said. "You've been asleep since the fire died." The ground stopped shaking not long after. She looked down at her hands. The skin around her wound had taken on a faint shimmer, almost like frost. "The fire's gone?" "For now," he said. "The island's still hot beneath our feet, but the flames are out. Whatever you did, it worked." Arya pushed herself to her feet. The world seemed different, sharper somehow, the colors brighter, the air alive with quiet murmurs she couldn't quite understand.
When she touched the nearest root of the ashen tree, she felt warmth flow through her fingertips, like the heartbeat of something vast and kind. "The sea is calmer, too," Gendry went on. "The Elder says the path east will hold for a while. We can sail again." Arya nodded slowly. "Then we leave before it changes its mind." But the Elder approached then, his white hair stirring in the wind. "You cannot go yet, wolf of the setting sun," he said. "The fire sleeps, but not forever. You must hear what the tree has shown." Before Arya could speak, the air shifted. A low hum filled the clearing, and the branches above began to move, not in the wind, but with purpose. The leaves rustled, glowing faintly as the trunk's carved face opened its eyes. They were red as autumn leaves. Arya froze. The voice that followed was not a sound, but a feeling, rising in her chest like a memory long forgotten. "Child of winter, you bear the blood of those who walked west when the world was new. You have given of yourself to mend what was broken. But the breaking is not done." She stepped closer, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" The voice deepened, rumbling through the roots and the ground beneath her feet. "The fire and the sea were born together. You have soothed one, but the other stirs in answer. The tide will rise again, higher and hungrier. It will not stop until it touches the eastern shore." Arya's mouth went dry. "Westeros?" "Yes. The breaking moves toward home." The branches shuddered, and the voice softened. "You must go east, Starkblood. Carry the memory of the first across the water. Only there can the old bonds be mended. Only there will the wolf meet its shadow." Before she could ask more, the light faded. The eyes closed, and the great tree fell silent once again. For a long time, no one spoke. Then the Elder bowed deeply. "The tree has chosen you. The world turns its eyes east." Gendry's jaw tightened. "Then we'll go home. But this time, we're not chasing ghosts or prophecies. We'll go because it's where we belong." Arya looked up at the branches, at the faint glimmer of light fading among the leaves.
Home. The word felt strange on her tongue. After everything she had seen, could she still call it that? By nightfall, they had made ready the ship. The Nymeria's song bore new scars from the storm and fire, but her hull held strong. The pale folk who chose to stay behind stood upon the burning shore, their faces lit by the soft glow of the ashen tree. The woman with the feathered cloak pressed a small bundle into Arya's hands, a shard of the tree's root, smooth and white as bone. "For remembrance," she said, "and for warning." Arya took it silently. She could feel a faint pulse in the wood, as if the tree's heart still beat within it. As they pushed off from the shore, the island seemed to fade behind them, swallowed by mist and the glow of the molten sky. The red sun hung low, a dying ember above the horizon. The wind carried the scent of ash and salt, sharp and heavy with promise. For 2 days they sailed east under calm skies. The sea lay still and silver, the stars bright and clear. But on the 3rd night, the wind began to change. The water grew restless, the waves rising and falling in strange patterns. Jory came to her cabin, his face pale. "Captain, the sea's glowing again, just like before." Arya went on deck. The water around the Nymeria's song shimmered faintly, not blue this time, but white, like starlight trapped beneath the waves. The air hummed, faint but constant, a sound that made the hair on her neck stand on end. The elder joined her. "The deep remembers," he murmured. "It watches." Arya's eyes swept the horizon. The eastern sky glowed faintly, a promise of dawn or doom. She could not tell which. Somewhere far behind, the red sun flickered and vanished. That night, sleep would not come.
She dreamed of the sea rising, swallowing cities, of faces she knew, Jon, Sansa, Bran, standing upon the walls of Winterfell as waves crashed around them. She saw the ashen tree burning again, its roots reaching across the ocean, and in its heart stood a shadow shaped like herself, with eyes like blood and steel. When she woke, the ship was already turning. The eastern wind had returned, strong and certain, filling their sails and driving them onward. The crew moved with renewed vigor, and even Gendry's weary face had softened with hope. "Land soon," he said, pointing toward the horizon. "If the stars are right, we'll see Westeros before the next moon." Arya nodded, though her heart was heavy. She reached into her cloak and touched the shard of the ashen tree. It was warm still, pulsing faintly in time with her heartbeat. She turned her face toward the wind, the scent of home mingling with the whispers of the sea. Somewhere ahead lay the shores she had left behind, changed perhaps, but still hers. And far beneath the waves, unseen, something vast and patient stirred once more. The world was not finished breaking. Not yet. The eastern wind carried the Nymeria's song across the wide gray sea, swift and relentless. Days passed in a blur of mist and sunlight, and though the men dared to hope, Arya Stark felt the unease deepen within her chest. The sea was too still, too watchful, as though the calm itself were a disguise. Each night she dreamt of waves that whispered her name and of eyes opening beneath the water, pale and endless. On the 7th morning, the lookout's cry broke through the hush. "Land ahead!" The crew rushed to the rails. Through the mist, a faint dark line rose against the horizon. Not the cliffs of Westeros as Arya remembered them, but something rougher, wilder. The closer they sailed,
the more certain she became that this was no known shore. "Could the currents have carried us south?" Gendry asked, squinting into the light.
Arya shook her head.
"No, the stars led us true. This is the right course."
The elder, who had stood silent since dawn, raised a trembling hand.
"Then the land itself has changed. The sea's rising shifts more than water. It reshapes what it touches."
They sailed nearer, and soon the mist fell away to reveal a coastline torn and broken. Forests clung to the cliffs, their trees half drowned, roots twisting down into the waves. The sand below was black, and the wind carried a smell that was not quite death but close. Old, heavy, like soil freshly turned. Arya gave the order to drop anchor. "We go ashore," she said. "If this is Westeros, we'll find proof soon enough." The first landing party rowed through shallow waters, their oars churning up silt the color of ink. When Arya's boots touched the sand, it sank slightly, soft and cold. She looked inland. The trees swayed, though there was no wind, their leaves whispering against one another with voices like sighs. "This doesn't feel right," Gendry muttered. "Nothing has felt right since we left home," she said. They pressed forward, following a narrow path that wound up the cliffs. At the summit, they found a stretch of wild plain. The grass was brittle underfoot, the color of rust. Yet, in the distance, half shrouded by fog, Arya saw something that made her stop. Stone towers. They were broken and overgrown, but unmistakable. Towers built in the manner of the north, strong and square. The nearer they came, the more certain she was. The walls were marked with carvings she knew well. Wolves and dire wolves, winter roses, and the spiral knot of House Stark. "Winterfell?" Jory whispered. "No," Arya said slowly. "Too small, but built by the same hands once." They passed through a shattered gate into a courtyard strewn with debris. Moss covered the stones, and black vines coiled up the broken walls. A well stood in the center, its water dark and still. Arya knelt beside it and peered into the depths.
Her reflection wavered, not alone, but joined by another face beneath her own. For an instant, it was her father's. Then it was gone. Behind her, Gendry called out, "Over here!" He stood before a ruined hall, its doors half hanging from rusted hinges. Inside, the air was cold and dry. What little sunlight entered fell upon a long table of cracked stone. Upon it lay remnants of weapons, swords, shields, a helm marked with the direwolf sigil, blackened and bent. One of the sailors made the sign of the seven. "God save us," he muttered. "What happened here?" Arya reached out and touched the helm. The metal crumbled beneath her fingers, falling to dust. "Time," she said, "and fire." The elder bent to study the floor. His eyes widened. "No," he whispered, "not time. The sea came this far once before. This is what it leaves when it recedes." As if in answer, the ground shuddered faintly beneath their feet. Dust fell from the rafters. "Back to the ship," Arya ordered. "Now!" They hurried down the path, the tremors growing stronger. By the time they reached the beach, the waves had begun to draw back from the shore, dragging sand and stone with them. The sea retreated so far that the skeletons of ships emerged from the shallows, their hulls blackened, their sails rotted to threads. "What's happening?" Jory cried. The elder's voice shook. "The deep gathers its breath. The breaking begins anew." A roar split the air. The sea surged forward in a single, towering wave, taller than the masts of the Nymeria's song. Arya's heart clenched. "Run!" They sprinted toward the boats,
the ground trembling beneath their feet. The waves struck the cliffs with a sound like thunder, swallowing the shore. The spray rose higher than the trees, and for a moment Arya saw nothing but white water and sky. Then the current seized her, dragging her down. The world became noise and darkness. She fought to surface, lungs burning. Somewhere in the chaos, she felt a hand catch her wrist.
Gendry's grip, strong, unyielding. Together they broke through the foam, gasping. The Nymeria's song loomed ahead, rolling in the waves. Crewmen shouted, throwing ropes. Arya caught one and clung as the next surge lifted them high, slamming them against the hull. Strong hands pulled her aboard. She collapsed on the deck, coughing seawater. Gendry fell beside her, chest heaving. The ship groaned, but she held. The wave passed, leaving only the wreckage of the shore behind, the ruined towers swallowed by the rising tide. The elder steadied himself against the mast. "The sea's memory has reached this shore. It knows you've returned." Arya rose unsteadily. "It's not done yet." That night, the sea glowed again, red this time, the color of the sinking sun. The crew huddled close, whispering. Gendry found Arya at the bow, her face lit by the eerie light. "Where do we go now?" he asked. "North," she said. "If Westeros still stands, the North will endure." He frowned. "And if it doesn't?" She looked into the dark horizon where sea and sky met. "Then we'll find what's left. There's always something left." The elder's voice drifted from behind them. "The tree spoke of a shadow waiting for the wolf. North is the path it foresaw. But know this, child of winter. Shadows have no form of their own. They are made by what stands in the light." Arya said nothing. She drew needle, its edge catching the faint red glow. Around them, the sea whispered her name once more, low and insistent, as though the water itself waited for her answer. She sheathed the blade. "Then let it come," she murmured. And as the Nymeria's song turned its prow toward the north, the waves parted before her, glittering like blood beneath the dying sun. The northern winds met them before dawn, cold and sharp, biting through cloak and leather as if to remind them whose realm they entered. The sea grew restless again, gray and cruel, and the sky hung low and heavy with clouds. Snow began to fall. Not the gentle flakes of winter's first breath, but thick, wet curtains that blurred the horizon. Arya Stark stood at the bow, her hair whipped wild by the wind. The taste of salt and snow filled her mouth, and something within her stirred. Not fear, but a kind of fierce recognition. She had seen this sea before, long ago, as a child staring from the battlements of Winterfell and dreaming of what lay beyond it. Now she returned from the other side, older, scarred, but unbroken. "Winter's calling," Gendry muttered, pulling his cloak tighter. "Feels like the north again." Arya nodded. "Aye, but the north doesn't feel us yet." The elder stood near the mast, his pale eyes turned to the clouds. "The storm comes not for weather," he said. "It is a memory rising. The sea recalls what was taken from it." As if to prove his words, thunder rolled across the water, deep and distant. The waves swelled higher. Through the mist, the shadow of the coastline appeared, dark hills and forests smothered in snow. At last, Arya saw what she had longed to see. The faint gray line of land she knew must be Westeros. Yet, even from afar, she sensed that something was wrong. The forests seemed sparse, the rivers wider, the air thick with a silence that was not peace, but waiting. "Bring her in slow," she ordered.
We'll find a bay to anchor and see what's left." The Nymeria's song crept toward the coast. Broken masts jutted from the shallows, the ribs of sunken ships, ancient and nameless. Bones littered the beaches, half buried in frost. Some were human, others were not. Jory crossed himself. "Seven, save us. What happened here?" "War," Gendry said grimly. "Or worse." Arya said nothing. She could feel eyes upon her, unseen, patient, the kind that watched from beneath the surface. They found a narrow inlet and lowered the longboats. The snow fell thicker now, veiling the land in white silence. Arya led the first party ashore. Her boots crunched through ice and drift.
The air smelled of pine and ash.
"This was the Wolf's Wood," she murmured. "I'd know it anywhere. But it's wrong." The trees were taller, twisted, their bark blackened as if scorched by old fire. The ground was uneven, ridged and broken. They found the remains of a road, ancient stones scattered like bones, leading inland toward a rise of hills. There, half buried beneath frost and ivy, stood a gate of ironwood. Its surface bore the faint trace of a direwolf's sigil, though time and weather had nearly erased it. Arya brushed the snow away and felt the grooves beneath her fingers. "This was ours," she whispered. "Winterfell's outpost, maybe. Or what became of it?" The elder knelt beside her, his breath steaming in the cold. "The sea remembers its shores. What the tide claims, it sometimes gives back. Changed." The gate creaked as they forced it open. Beyond lay a courtyard, half collapsed and filled with snowdrifts. At its center stood a tree, a weirwood, ancient and white, its branches bare but for a few crimson leaves trembling in the wind. Its face was worn smooth by time, but its eyes still bled sap like tears. Arya's heart clenched. She had seen many heart trees in her life, but this one felt different, colder, lonelier, as though it mourned something long lost. "Old gods still watch here," Jory whispered. "Maybe," Arya said. "Or maybe they're sleeping." She stepped forward and laid a hand against the trunk. The bark was colder than stone. For a heartbeat, the world around her dimmed, the sound of wind and sea fading into silence. Then came a whisper, faint as snow sliding from a branch. "Wolf of the setting sun, the tide follows you home." She drew back sharply. "Did you hear that?" Gendry frowned. "Hear what?" "The tree. It spoke." The elder's eyes widened. "Then the roots have carried word faster than the wind. The breaking comes to this shore as well." Arya turned toward the hills beyond.
"Then we need to find who's left, if anyone's left, before it does." They followed the road inland, past ruins half swallowed by ice. The snow deepened, slowing their progress. As dusk fell, they saw firelight ahead, faint and flickering, but real. Arya motioned for silence. They crept closer, weapons ready. In a hollow, sheltered by stone, stood a small camp. A handful of figures huddled around a fire, their clothes ragged, their faces gaunt. When they saw Arya's party emerge from the darkness, they rose in alarm. "Hold!" Arya called. "We mean no harm." One stepped forward, a woman with gray streaks in her hair, a spear in her hand. Her eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" "Arya Stark of Winterfell," Arya said. "We've come from across the Western Sea." The woman's spear wavered. "Winterfell is gone," she said flatly. "Buried under the tide 20 years past."
The words struck like a blade. "Gone?" Arya repeated. The woman nodded. "The sea rose and swallowed the lowlands. The rivers turned brackish. Those who lived fled north to the mountains. The old world drowned." Gendry stepped closer. "How are you still here, then?" "We moved with the trees," she said. "The gods guided us, or so the elders claim. But the sea creeps higher every year. Soon there will be nowhere left to run." Arya's thoughts reeled. 20 years, yet she had not aged so much as a season. The voyage west had stolen more than distance from her. It had stolen time itself. "The sea moves faster than it should," the elder murmured. "The waking of the deep unravels more than land." The woman lowered her spear. "If you are truly of Stark blood, then the old gods have sent you back to us. There's a place, the last refuge. We call it Grey Watch. It stands on the cliffs above the Drowned Vale. You'll find what's left of the north there." Arya met her gaze. "Then take us." By morning they were marching through snow again, the woman leading the way.
Behind them, the pale folk moved in silence, their eyes glinting like frost. Gendry walked at Arya's side, his breath clouding in the cold.
20 years, he said softly. "It feels like we sailed through a dream."
"Maybe we did," Arya replied. "Or maybe the dream sailed through us."
As they crested a hill, the clouds parted briefly. Far ahead, upon a sheer black cliff, stood a fortress. Its towers rose stark against the pale sky, battered but unbroken. Smoke curled from its chimneys, proof of life.
"Grey Watch," said the woman. "The last keep of the north."
Arya stared long at it. Something within her stirred. Pride, grief, hope.
"Then we're not too late," she said.
But as they descended toward the valley, the wind shifted. From the sea behind them came a sound, low and deep, rolling through the snow like distant thunder. The waves were rising again. The tide had found her trail. Snow swept across the plains like white smoke, the wind cutting through fur and leather with teeth of ice. The journey to Grey Watch took 3 days. Each night they camped among the ruins of old villages, where hearts had long gone cold and walls sagged beneath the weight of years. Sometimes Arya thought she heard movement beyond the trees, soft steps pacing their camp, the faint rasp of breath. But when she turned her head, there was only snow and silence. The woman who led them, her name was Elaine, though it was not the Elaine Arya once knew, spoke little on the road. Her people followed her quietly, a hard, lean company with hollow eyes. They moved with the wary grace of those who had lived too long in danger. The pale folk from Northraven traveled among them without fear, as though they had always known this land. And perhaps they had. On the second day, they passed a frozen lake. Its surface was glassy and black, and through it Arya saw shapes moving beneath the ice, slow, sinuous, too large to name. The elder murmured prayers in his strange tongue. The others hurried their steps.
By dusk of the 3rd day, they reached the cliffs. The wind screamed there, rising from the sea far below. Grey Watch stood upon the highest of them, a stronghold hewn of black stone, its walls streaked with frost, its gates carved with the direwolf sigil of old. Fires burned upon its battlements, defying the storm. The sight struck Arya like a blow. It was not Winterfell, but something of the north lived in it still. The stoic strength, the endurance against time and tide. Guards met them at the gate, grim-faced men and women wrapped in furs. Their armor was pieced together from relics of older ages, mail and plate etched with rust. When Arya gave her name, A murmur rippled through them. "Stark blood," said one. "The sea brings back what it once took." They were ushered inside. The halls of Grey Watch were narrow and cold, but they glowed with firelight and the smell of smoke and broth. Children's laughter echoed faintly from deeper chambers. It was the first laughter Arya had heard in many moons. An older man awaited them in the great hall. His hair was white, his beard streaked with gray, and his cloak bore the faded direwolf of House Stark. He rose slowly as they entered, his eyes narrowing with disbelief. "No," he said, voice trembling. "It cannot be." Arya froze. "You know me?" The old man took a halting step forward. "How could I not? You wear my sister's face." Her heart clenched. "Your sister?" "I am Brandon Stark," he said, "son of Lord Rickon, grandson of Sansa the Wise. My grandmother told tales of the one who sailed west when the world was young." He studied her face. "And here you stand, unaged, unchanged. Gods help us. The stories were true." The hall fell silent. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Arya found no words. She looked upon him, his lined face, his trembling hands, and saw all the years that had passed, all that she had missed. "How long?" she whispered. "More than a century since the red sun rose over the sea," he said softly.
The world drowned in your absence. The truth struck like a blade. Time had carried her farther than distance ever could. The girl who left Westeros had returned to a land of strangers. Brandon turned to the elder. "The old blood walks again. What brings her here now?" "The breaking spreads," the elder said. "The sea rises once more. It follows her path." Murmurs filled the hall, fear, awe, doubt. Brandon silenced them with a raised hand. "Then we must know what it wants." Later that night, Arya stood upon the ramparts, gazing out over the dark sea. The moon was pale and full, its light glimmering upon restless waves. The sound of the tide carried up to her, steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Gendry joined her. "A century," he said quietly. "Feels like we stepped through time itself." She nodded. "Everyone I knew is gone. Sansa, Bran, Jon, all dust now." "Yet you're here," he said. "And maybe that means there's still something worth saving." Arya said nothing. The shard of the ashen tree hung around her neck, warm against her skin. Its pulse had grown stronger since they reached this shore. She could feel it thrum in time with the sea. Below them, waves smashed against the cliffs, spraying foam into the air. Gendry frowned. "The water's higher than when we came." Arya's hand tightened on the parapet. "It's following me." A horn sounded suddenly from the tower above, low, urgent. The gates clanged shut. Soldiers rushed to the walls. Brandon appeared beside them, his cloak flaring in the wind. "From the west," he shouted. "The sea moves against us." Arya leaned over the battlement and saw the impossible. The tide was rising, yes, but not as water should. It climbed the cliffs in columns, as though invisible hands drew it upward. Within the water, pale lights flickered, eyes, hundreds of them, gleaming with cold intent. "The memory of the deep," the elder whispered. "It comes to reclaim its blood." "Then it can try," Arya said. She drew needle, its steel catching the moonlight. "Sound the alarms! Man the defenses!" The fortress came alive. Fires blazed along the walls, ballistae creaked, arrows hissed through the air. But no arrow could wound the sea.
The water surged higher, sweeping over the outer wall, crashing through gates and corridors. Soldiers were thrown aside like leaves. Arya fought through the chaos, cutting down what shapes emerged from the foam. Bodies of water and shadow, their faces featureless, but for eyes that glowed with faint blue fire. Each strike scattered them like mist, yet they reformed, relentless. "Fall back!" Gendry shouted. "To the inner keep!" They fled through narrow halls as the sea poured in behind them. The roar of water filled every corridor. Arya turned once to look back and saw the elder standing amid the flood, his staff raised, his eyes blazing white. Light erupted from him, halting the wave for a heartbeat before it swallowed him whole. By the time they reached the great hall, the fortress trembled. Brandon stood beside the heart fire, sword in hand. "The cliffs won't hold," he said. "If the gods sent you here, girl, now is the hour to show us why." Arya's pulse thundered in her ears. The shard of the ashen tree burned against her chest, the heat spreading through her veins. She tore it free and held it high. The fire flared, and for an instant, she saw again the great tree of the island, its branches ablaze, its voice filling her mind. "The wolf must stand where sea and fire meet, or all shall drown." Understanding struck her like lightning. "The heart tree," she gasped. "The gods would. Take me there." Brandon hesitated only a moment before nodding. Together they ran, the roar of the sea at their backs. The God's Wood of Greywatch lay atop the cliff, its weirwood standing tall amid the storm. Lightning split the sky as Arya approached, waves crashing below. She pressed the shard into the tree's bark, and the world shuddered.
Light burst from the roots, racing outward like fire across the ground. The sea froze mid-surge, the storm halted, the air held still. Arya felt her body fill with something vast and cold and endless. The memory of the deep, the voice of the fire, the whisper of the wind. "Child of winter," the voices said as one. "You have walked every shore. Now stand for all of them." She closed her eyes, and the sea obeyed. When she opened them again, the storm was gone. The tide had retreated, leaving the cliffs drenched but unbroken. The night was quiet, save for the wind's sigh through the trees. Gendry found her kneeling by the weirwood, its roots glowing faintly. "What did you do?" he asked, awed. Arya looked toward the horizon, where dawn's first light touched the water. "I made it remember mercy," she said softly. Below them, the sea lay still at last. But far out beyond sight, something stirred once more in the depths. Slow, patient, waiting. Dawn broke upon the battered walls of Greywatch, and for the first time in many years, the sea was still. Mist hung low over the cliffs, ghostly and pale, curling through the ruins like smoke from a dying fire. The fortress stood bruised but alive. Broken battlements jutted toward the sky, and the scent of salt and ash lingered in the air. Arya Stark stood beneath the heart tree, her hand resting against its white bark. The glow that had filled its roots through the night had faded to a faint shimmer, like embers beneath snow. The shard of the ashen tree lay in her palm, cracked and dull, its pulse quiet at last. She felt hollow, drained as if the sea had carried something out of her and left her less than whole. But peace had come, if only for a while. She looked down from the cliff and saw the tide resting far below, calm as glass, its surface gleaming gold with sunrise. Behind her, Gendry approached, his cloak torn and his arm bound with linen. "It's done then?" he asked. "For now," Arya said. "The sea sleeps again." He joined her at the edge, his breath steaming in the cold air. "You saved them, Arya. All of them." She shook her head.
I only reminded the world what it had forgotten. From the courtyard below rose the faint sounds of rebuilding, hammer on stone, the murmur of voices, the crackle of new fires. Survivors moved among the wreckage, gathering the fallen and repairing what walls still stood. The pale folk of Northraven worked beside the Northmen, silent and tireless, as if the sea's fury had not touched them at all. Lord Brandon Stark, old, weary, but unbroken, stood at the hall's threshold, his face turned toward the light. When he saw Arya, he bowed his head deeply. "The old gods favored us last night," he said. "Perhaps they favor you most of all." "They favor balance," Arya replied. "And balance demands its price." He studied her face, and for a moment the lines of grief softened. "You have the look of all the Starks who ever bore the weight of winter," he said, "and the eyes of one who has seen beyond it." Arya turned from him to the sea once more. "Winter never ends, my lord. It only learns new faces." Later, when the dead were burned and the fires had died low, Arya climbed alone to the northern watchtower. The wind there was fierce, biting through fur and flesh alike. From that height, she could see the long stretch of frozen shore, the forests beyond, and the white spires of distant mountains. Something stirred within her, a memory of childhood, of racing through Winterfell's courtyards with snow in her hair and laughter on her lips. For a heartbeat, she could almost smell the hot bread from the kitchens, hear Jon's voice calling her "little sister." Then the memory faded, swallowed by the wind. Gendry found her there near dusk. He carried 2 cups of ale, and though the brew was weak and bitter, it warmed her hands. They drank in silence for a time, watching the sun sink behind the sea. "What will you do now?" he asked quietly.
"I don't know," Arya admitted.
"The sea won't rest forever. It never does. But I've seen enough of it for one lifetime." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe you'll stay." She looked at him, and in his eyes she saw all that still tied her to the living world, hope, stubborn and human. "For a while," she said, "but not forever. I don't belong in one place." "The North could use someone like you." "The North needs someone who belongs to it," she said softly. "I was never that." He laughed under his breath. "No one belongs more than a Stark." She did not answer. The sea's calm surface glimmered below, but even from here she could see faint ripples spreading outward, as if something deep beneath stirred again. That night, sleep eluded her. She wandered the halls of Greywatch, now quiet save for the whisper of wind through the broken stones. The Pale Folk were gathered in the chapel, their low, haunting songs weaving through the dark like threads of silver. When she stepped inside, the elder turned his head toward her. He had aged years since the night of the storm. His hair hung thin, his eyes dimmed, yet there was peace in his expression. "The sea will rise again," he said softly, as if answering her thoughts. "But not in your time." Arya frowned. "Then why do I still feel its call?" "Because it does not end. It waits for those who can hear it. You were born to walk between the tides, between what was and what will be." "Then what am I to do now?" The elder smiled faintly. "Live, teach, remember." He lowered his gaze. "And when the tide calls again, answer as you always have, with the courage of a wolf." Before she could reply, he closed his eyes. His body stilled, then turned to mist, rising upward and scattering into the air like salt caught on the wind. Arya stood there a long time, alone among the singing pale folk. When the last note faded, she walked out into the cold night. The moon hung low and full over the sea, casting a road of silver light across the water.
By morning, she had made her choice. She found Gendry in the yard, overseeing the mending of a wall. His face was weary, but lit with quiet determination. When he saw her, he set down his hammer. "I know that look," he said. "You're leaving." She nodded. "The sea's still quiet, but it won't stay that way. Someone has to keep watch, to know when it turns again." He said nothing, only looked at her for a long moment. Then he took her hand, rough and scarred as it was. "Wherever you go, Stark, don't forget there's a home here now." "I won't," she said. The men readied a small ship, swift, sturdy, built from the remnants of the Nymeria's song. Its sails were white as snow, its prow carved in the shape of a wolf's head. As the crew loaded provisions, Arya stood at the water's edge. Brandon came to her side. "The stories say you went west to find what lay beyond the world," he said. "Now you sail east again. What is there left to find?" "Whatever's waiting," Arya said. He nodded slowly. "Then may the old gods guide your sail, as they once guided mine." When the tide turned, she boarded the ship. Gendry watched from the quay, his hair whipped by the wind. She raised a hand in farewell, and he returned it, his figure growing smaller as the distance widened between them. The sail caught the morning light, and the ship glided forward into the open water. The sea stretched before her, endless and silent. But its silence was not empty. It was expectant, alive. Arya touched the hilt of needle, then the shard of the ashen tree that hung around her neck. She felt its faint warmth return, pulsing softly against her skin. The world had broken and mended, and would break again. But she was still here, wolf, wanderer, witness to the turning of tides. As the shore of Westeros faded behind her, she whispered into the wind, "Not today." And the sea, vast and ancient, whispered back,